People ask me all the time when they see my torsos and my hollow form finish products, they ask me what I use for finish. What do I use for finish? They think finish has got to have a magic potion to make my pieces look the way they do. And what it is really is more about tool control, not tearing the grain up to begin with, going the right way to the grain with supported fibers, using a slicing, shearing cuts instead of scraping. The tools always have to be very, very sharp. I sharpen often. I don't let them get anywhere near dull. And I'm going to use that same concept. And I could talk about this whole sequence of sanding in 2 words. Sharp sandpaper. Okay? What is sandpaper? It's billions and billions of little tiny sharp particles. It's not going to last very long. It can't last very long. So there's no sense in buying the very expensive sandpaper, cloth back sandpaper and things, because the particle that's doing the cutting is going to get dull very quickly. Hundreds and hundreds of feet go by that little piece of sandpaper particle. It's going to get dull. We got to throw it out and use sharp sandpaper. Then I'm going to very cleanly cut, especially the end grain fibers, with sharp sandpaper. Then it doesn't matter what I use for finish after that. You could just wax it, you could buff it, you could use polyurethane, varnish, lacquer, whatever. It doesn't matter anymore because you've prepared the surface and the wood's going to look great. I normally don't have to sand with power equipment on the outside of my bowls because I'm able to shear scrape and get a really clean surface with my tool control. And my goal when I'm on the outside of the bowl is to start sanding with the 220, 320 grit sandpaper. But I'm just going to show you if it did need to have coarser sanding, how we do that. Normally I would only use the coarser sand discs on the drill on the inside of the vessel where I'm going to have some tool marks, because I can't shear scrape and get as clean of a cut on the inside as I can the outside. And then the outside of the bowl and the outside of the hollow form are both the same. You're going to get a very, very clean cut off the tools so you don't have to sand so much. But just to talk about the drill use, if we think about what's happening here, the sandpaper is going on the 9 o'clock side, the sandpaper is going up, okay? And if we turn the lathe on, and we want to try on variable speed lathes, our electronic variable speeds are nice because we can get the speed down. I want to get the speed way down, so I'm going to slow it down, slow it down, slow it down, slow it down. I want the wood going very slow. And now the wood is going down and the 9 o'clock side of the sandpaper is going up. I can get a very good abrasive cut going here. And I'm not going to sand this whole bowl. I'm just going to sand a little bit of the rim here just to show you the sanding sequence. All right. All right, so now what am I looking for? I'm going to look for a little white streak like that, a little tool mark. If you can see that, I want to make sure that goes away first. Other than that, I've got a little white streak right at the edge. There might be a little bit of a fuzz there. So I'm going to go just a little bit more. I'm going to push pretty hard here. Make the sandpaper grunt a little bit. Okay, so now can you see where it's sanded and where it's not sanded? All right, so now let's going to switch grits. I'm going to go to the finer grit. I'm going to go down to 220. 220 is the finest grit that I'll ever use on a sanding disc. Okay, because I want to sand with sharp sandpaper. What happens when I'm sanding here is the sandpaper on that disc is going to get dull in a big hurry. A lot of wood going by and a lot of revolutions of the drill. So it's not going to last very long. That's toast. That's done. Throw it away. It's gone. All right? Okay, now we'll look back in here, see if we have any streaks or any marks in it. Okay, nice and clean. Now we're going to go to hand sandpaper. So the last disc was 220. I'm going to go to 320. I'm going to have the lathe speed slow. and I'm going to push really firmly. I'm going to push on the pad of my fingers. There's no gloves on, there's no leather pads, there's no rubber foam, there's nothing on here because my finger is a heat sensor. What happens if I heat this up? It's going to burnish the wood. If I'm heating it up, it means I'm cutting on dull sandpaper. So I'm going to push very firmly here, and if we look right down here, see if we can see it, the shavings of the little tiny shavings, isn't that a different statement? Sandpaper shavings, okay? Little tiny shavings that are coming off from the sandpaper are being blown away with the fan so that it doesn't get our camera dusty. So we really can't see it very well here because of the fan, but that's a good plan. And I should be wearing a face mask. I've got one here. When I was thinking about doing this entire piece, well, I was going to put my dust mask on, but I didn't, just to do this little bit here for you. Okay, so I'm going to push hard. I go back and forth. Now that's toast. That's done. I'm going to throw that away. Never going back there. Move on to new sandpaper. Get sharp sandpaper. Push hard. Now that whole side of the sandpaper is done, and I really should be done sanding that part. I'm only going to sand with the coarsest grit that I need to get the job done. I'm going to take out the tool marks. I'm going to take out any torn out grain, any blotchiness in the surface of the wood with the coarsest grit that I need to do that with. Then, as I go from grit to grit to grit to grit, I'm not sanding anymore. I'm just cleaning up the surface and taking the scratches off from the previous sandpaper grit. So I'm really just taking the scratches off. I'm not sanding, not going through any work at all. So it's going to be very quick and very easy to use sharp sandpaper. Now sandpaper has a sweet spot, okay? As I'm pulling on this, I'm going to push my fingers on it. Watch what happens to the sandpaper. Well, you can't really see it too much, but it's wanting to pull. There it goes, okay? Can you see how it pulled out of my hand? There's a resistance to the sharp sandpaper that pulls against your fingers. And so that sweet spot is really important. As you're pushing against the sandpaper, you're going to feel that drag. You're going to feel that abrasive resistance, okay? Once the sandpaper is dull, then you no longer feel that sweet spot, feel that resistance. So you can tell whether sandpaper is dull just by the fact, first of all, it'll heat up and get hot, and second, you don't have the sweet spot. You don't have that drag, that pull of sharp sandpaper. So there's a feel to good sandpaper use, okay? So that was 320. Let's go to 400. Again, look at how slow the lathe is going. I don't need to work very long. I've got a very relatively small area here, only about an inch at the top that I've sanded, just so that we can get this quickly through a series. Okay, then we go to 600. All right, and we are done. You can see how polished that looks, this last inch. You see where it's not sanded and where it is. It's got a little gray shadow to it compared to what's sanded, okay?